Hello, and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I'm joined by Alex Stewart.
Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, and Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hello, Joe.
Hello. Today we are talking about all the things that you've asked us to talk about, i.e. it's a questions answered episode. So we have questions from people asking such things as Ballon d'Or opinion, Marcelo Bielsa, relegated sides in Europe and players that might be picked up from them, Leicester's form, the 5 substitutions rule. There's loads of stuff to talk about, and we're going to try and get through as many as we can. But before we do that, let me remind you that if you would like to, you can get a 30-day free trial at The Athletic by visiting theathletic.com/Tifo. theathletic.com/Tifo to read the work of our fine colleagues on the football side of things, or indeed the sports side of things, as The Athletic covers 10 other sports too. It really is the place to be for learning the absolute most you can, is that right? Or the most in the most efficient small amount of time, but with the best version of the story.
Nice plug. Nice plug.
Thanks.
Lovely.
Please go and do that. It is actually very good, even though I've made it sound awful. But anyway, more of me in a moment after the music is played, and we'll leave you in the cool hands and the warm embrace of ourselves. Okay, first question is from B. Boxon. B-Bosson. Opinions on Ballon d'Or cancellation. What would be Tifo's top 3 or 5? Seb, you didn't want to include this question, so I'm going to go to you first.
Well, on the cancellation, I just think it was the strangest announcement I've seen in a long time. It just reeked of an organisation that took itself far too seriously. It was as if they were cancelling Christmas. It's bizarre. Am I the only one to think that?
No, yeah. I mean, I think it's the award of the fanboys, isn't it? I mean, it's the award that means very little to fans of football, and the award which means an awful lot to fans of football players.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I just culturally I have a little bit of a problem with it, and I more so since FIFA launched their rival award, the best, imaginatively named award ceremony, which seems to be just a kind of football equivalent of a penis measuring contest. It's just I don't know.
Can I say a penis measuring contest if penises had absolutely no use in the world? They weren't used to reproduce. They did, there was no sensation. They were just sort of dead meat.
Right. No, that's a excellent little 30 seconds. I'd love to have been in the meeting where they came up with the ideas for that rival ceremony. What are we going to call it? Where should we hold it? Why are we even doing this? How much money are we spending on it? Let's just call it the best. That'd be nice. That'd be a real slap in the face for the Ballon d'Or.
What does this
I
give
hate
us?
the entire topic.
Okay, but bearing that in mind, what would your top three
Don't care.
have been?
Don't care. Don't
Fair
care.
enough. Alex,
I'm not even gonna indulge you. No.
You coming to me now?
I'm coming to you, big time.
Right.
Big
So,
time.
I mean, on the basis that it's unusual that Seb is so unenthusiastic about something.
Give me something. I need one of you to answer this question, because if I have to answer it, then Robbie Brady's going to be at the top and no one's going to be happy.
Let's do that conversation. That's always a winner.
Let's be honest. Okay, people were saying that it was Robert Lewandowski's year. KDB would have been in the conversation too.
I mean, okay, I have complete agreement with Seb on the pointlessness of the thing generally, but I have another angle on it. Which is that individual awards in a team sport are basically stupid, and there's no. So Robert Lewandowski, right? Incredible season, loads of goals. It's impossible to understand how Lewandowski would play outside of that team and without the service of the players behind him, and he wouldn't be able to attack in the same way if the defense wasn't as good as it is. And so, to me, it's just an incredibly hard thing to kind of quantify that on the basis that you demand an answer.
I do.
I don't know. Yeah, Lewandowski, Kevin De Bruyne, and Jefferson Lerma.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that B. Bosson is going to be particularly happy with that answer, but hey, we've answered it, B. Bosson, so how dare you?
Hey, I'll give you a serious answer. I'll give you a serious answer. Let's put in Virgil van Dijk, because I voted for him for Player of the Year and he didn't win, so I'm going to carry on my agenda. One of the ways to measure this, I think, well, the way it should be measured is what is the team, what is the player achieving, what is the team achieving, and what would be the difference in those achievements if that player wasn't there. And I think that's a really good kind of measure of impact and influence and status in the game. And I think, I haven't really heard an argument which pits another player as being more, not important is too vague, but essential, more essential to a player's present than Virgil van Dijk.
Alisson.
I see Alisson as a product of Van Dijk though, Alex, because it's Alisson is a beneficiary of the defensive conditions created by a Van Dijk that wouldn't be there without him.
Yeah, but the defensive conditions that Van Dijk plays under are set by the way the goalkeeper plays, commands his area, communicates with those defenders. And this is kind of my point, is that you can't separate those things out. There are very unusual instances where I think, for example, this season, and the Ballon d'Or conversations often just come down to Ronaldo fanboys and Messi fanboys, and I have
that's always a fascinating conversation. That one, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, I have no time for that, but you could actually make an argument to say that of all the seasons that Messi's been exceptional in, and let's not forget he's been exceptional consistently, this is the one where he's done most on his own. And he's had the least amount of support from the players around him, because Barcelona are kind of a dumpster fire at the moment. So maybe just give it to Messi.
Let the genie out of the bottle here, haven't I? Let's move on.
You wanted this question, so...
Well, I didn't want this question. B. Boschgon wanted this question. Anyway, Abhe1 asks, how would Marcelo Bielsa have flourished with a traditionally giant club like Real Madrid or Bayern Munich? I suppose this is off the back of Bielsa's achievement with Leeds United, getting Leeds promoted again after 16 years of being out of the Premier League, and also generally being one of the managers that a number of the modern greats call or cite as a significant influence on their career. But as a manager, never really getting the opportunity to manage at a top club. Is that fair, Alex?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, obviously, we don't necessarily know what conversations Bielsa has had with other clubs over time where he's not taken up those opportunities. They may well have been the case. I mean, those larger clubs do tend to have a recruitment strategy that's slightly more predicated on past achievements. And obviously, Bielsa has taken Leeds into the Premier League, but prior to that, his sole piece of silverware, as it is, was a gold medal with Argentina in the Olympics. So he's not achieved a lot in those terms, which might have barred him from the conversation. I think the more interesting point to make here is that Bielsa seems to have done best at clubs either in Argentina or clubs that have a sort of like a strong sense of identity in a slightly us against them way. So Athletic Club de Bilbao and also Leeds United, where there was this sense that these teams were pitted against something. So Leeds, it was pitted against years of underachievement and the difficulties in the boardroom, and prior to Radrizzani taking over and trying to recapture past glories in that way. With Athletic Club de Bilbao, it's the regional thing. And I think Bielsa needs those sorts of circumstances in which to flourish. I think he needs something to kind of be fighting against in some regard, partly because of his personal beliefs, but also partly, I think, because he works best with a group of players who are not necessarily heralded as being at the top of their game, and he's able to coax these incredible performances and commitment out of them by convincing them that they're going to achieve something that they would otherwise not have been able to achieve.
He needs Bayern, right? That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, he needs Bayern, and I think it's a lot harder to achieve that Bayern at a larger club.
With the prima donnas, is that what you mean?
I don't necessarily mean the prima donnas. I think that the bigger clubs are generally, they're used to more managerial churn. They're used to players who are there on the basis of extraordinary levels of skill rather than the sort of commitment that Bielsa requires necessarily. I just, obviously it's a thought experiment, we don't know, but I just feel both on a kind of ideological basis and also in terms of how he would work with those players, I can't quite see it gelling.
Do you think also that because of his potentially unpredictable explosiveness, that a big club might not want to take a risk on him? Because, I mean, it wasn't... Which club? Was it Lyon that he left after one day?
Marseille.
He was at Lazio for a couple of days, and then he was at Lille for a few months before going on to gardening leave, I think.
Right. And Marseille, he suddenly just departed without any kind of warning. So, I think there is a degree to which that probably plays into things as well. And again, you have that trade-off. If you're a club like Leeds or Athletic de Bilbao, you think, well, maybe actually we take a chance on... There is that slight unpredictableness to the way that he goes about things, but we're okay with that because we're punching below our weight or because of the circumstances that we work in constraining us otherwise.
Tell you what, many of the greats have that, actually. I was watching a documentary the other night about Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and this was... it was about halfway through. The band's broken up, but Neil Young and David Crosby decided they're going to get back together and do a tour. And they make 3 dates of the tour, I think, before Neil Young decides to leave in the dead of night, leaving a note. I think it's one of the rudest notes I've ever heard. And the note read, "Isn't it funny how some things that start spontaneously end spontaneously?" And he just leaves David Crosby on the road. He leaves him there with shows booked, people coming to see him and Neil Young. And Neil Young just I thought, wow, that guy's kind of a dick. But, also one of the greats, isn't he? So maybe that's why Real Madrid keep hiring him.
You do also hear some sort of fairly obnoxious stories about David Crosby as well. So
I'm sure that they've all got their foibles.
We should have, as soon as you brought them up, we should have just harmonised spontaneously.
Wouldn't that have been lovely? The Tifo travelling band.
An a cappella podcast, yeah.
Ilan Viju Varghese. Players that can be picked from the relegated sides in Europe. This is a nice one. I think Alex has been put to work on this, as should be the case. So, Alex, relegated sides in Europe. Presumably, there are a handful of players that we could steal for the other teams. Ooh, tell us who they are.
Yeah, so I'll leave the Premier League for Seb, if that's all right. We probably don't disagree on that much anyway. But what I've done is I've just written down a list of names, so I'm just going to read them out. It's not going to be very exciting, but I'll be as quick as I can. From Fortuna Düsseldorf, Kenan Karaman. Kevin Sturger's been released on a free, but he's worth looking at. Paderborn, you've got Jamilu Collins and Dennis Srebry. Couldn't find anyone from Lecce.
Sorry, can I stop you there for a second? If you're just going to read out the names, I think this is great, but would you be able to do it to the tune of Starry Night or something, just so that we can... Do you know what I mean? Just so that we can add a little bit more content to the content.
Isn't that like there's a Radio 4 game show that asks you to do that, isn't there?
Is there?
It's one song to the tune of another, so you're supposed to sing Happy Birthday but to the tune of Ride of the Valkyries.
I'll tell you what, go for Rise of the Valkyries and just try a few names. But with the names.
Sandro Tonali.
Seb, don't laugh. If you're going to laugh, move away from your microphone so we can hear him, because I want to give him as much space as possible to do this. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Away from my microphone.
Okay, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd also just before I go into song, I just quickly point out that Spal and Lecce don't have good players who aren't on loan from someone else.
Okay, fine.
Okay, Jonathan Silva, Kevin Ameru, brackets Leganes, Raldo Thomas, Mateus Vargas, Sergei Dada, brackets Espanyol. Moving on to League 1. Would you like me to change? How does the Marseillaise go?
Can we please go through some different classical tunes?
I mean, I can't really...
What about, I tell you what, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. You remember? Da 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 da. Seru
Gisare, Musa Konate, Alexis Blin, brackets Amiens, Aaron Leicester, Isigasilla, brackets Toulouse.
Okay, that was nice.
Yeah,
and now just one more to the tune of "Wannabe" by the Spice Girls, please.
I'm onto
If
the
you
Premier
wanna be
League
my
now.
lover.
So Perves Estupien, Will Hughes Penarada, Ismail Azar, brackets Watford.
Really wanna zig a zig.
There we go. I'm
That's
going to
nice.
leave Norwich
Well done.
and Bournemouth to Seb.
Little
Thank
clap
you.
there.
That was
Thank
very
you.
good.
Yeah,
That was very, very good.
No, I thought so.
The brackets was spectacular.
I'm just
Seb,
reading them literally as I've written them down because anyway.
You got two teams there, Seb.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one guy, the two guys from Spain. I really like, as a hulking great target man, Ante Budimir from Mallorca.
Right. Yeah.
He's not promising or developing. He's just a sort of a functional pivot for someone, a sort of lower half of a league, somebody. And Leganes' Roger Asale, who is I don't know. I'm still not quite sure how good a player he is, but I remember seeing him at the Toulon tournament. I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and he's interesting. I mean, he's 24 now, so I don't think he's going to develop into a Ballon d'Or / the best winner. Like how I combine segments there. Lovely
stuff.
But interesting player and someone that probably doesn't belong at the level below La Liga. So we'll see what happens with him.
I mean, there are. Sorry, just to say quickly, there are two players in that list who I think are really good. Obviously, Sandro Tonali, everyone knows about, but also Alexis Blin at Amiens is he's really worth looking at, and a couple of those other Amiens players too. But there are definitely guys who stand out in some of these teams and absolutely would be worth picking up by other people, and I'm sure Seb will go on to say that for some of these Premier League guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Premier League list really writes itself. Bournemouth, David Brooks, Callum Wilson, Philip Billing, Nathan Ake, who we think is off to Manchester City. Also, really like the goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale.
He was on my list as well.
I think he's excellent. Still young, still developing, still prone to making the odd mistake, but potentially excellent in the future. Norwich City, Robbie Brady, of course, just to keep Joe happy.
Hello.
Todd
Robbie
Cantwell.
Robbie Brady's at Burnley.
I know, we're going to mention him anyway. I mean, we can't have a podcast like this without mentioning Robbie Brady.
I see. I was very confused for a moment.
Just historic Norwich connection.
Thank you.
Obviously, more seriously, Todd Cantwell, Max Aarons, Jamal Lewis, Ben Godfrey. I think that's a pretty solid list.
Buendia?
Yeah. You know what? I feel a little bit disappointed by Buendia this season. I don't know if that's a problem with me, but I feel like he's someone whose reputation...
Physician, heal thyself.
I feel like... I don't know. I feel like his reputation still depends a little bit on what he did in the Championship, and for the kind of fee that Norwich are going to ask for, I'd be, I don't know, I'd hesitate.
I don't know about that, man. I think in terms of many of the different metrics, he ranked exceptionally highly in the league. He just didn't score or assist, partly because of the wider issues of the team, right? But I mean, I think as a player in the league, he showed that in a better team, he would definitely work.
I'm
Where
with
would
Joe
you
on
put
this
him?
one.
Okay, well, where would... Okay, so if, let's say he's obviously going to be available, where would you guys place him, and for how much? I'm interested.
Southampton, for, I don't know, like if they paid £15 million, they could probably get him at this point. Hey Alex, did you know that this podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the expert in men's below-the-belt grooming?
I'll be honest, no, not until you just hit me with that.
Seb, did you know that Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family duels?
Precision is important in that area.
It very much is. It very much is. And I'm excited today, gang, because Manscaped has just launched in the UK. We've gone years without using the right tools for the job over here. So you could be one of the first men in the country to experience Manscaped's life-changing products. And that's life-changing in a good way, gang. Their third-generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce manscaping accidents, and the water-resistant technology also allows you to groom whilst in the shower. I'm a multitasker, so I like to do everything at once. And we've got a special offer right now for all of you listening to this podcast. Get 20% off and free shipping right now by using the code EPL20, that's EPL20, at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com by using the code EPL20. Happy shaving, gang.
I don't think Southampton need him. I don't think he quite fits the higher energy style that Hasenhüttl's moving towards in one of those cutting in central midfield roles. I don't know. I think Buendia's issue is that he's a slightly weird player in that he's played on the right wing, but he spends an awful lot of his time further back and tucked inside, and that's obviously because Aaron's was supposed to overlap an awful lot on the right, but he does seem to me to be probably most effective if he's playing as an 8 on the outside of a midfield 3, pushing forwards with somebody really good covering him and able to pull the strings from a bit deeper. I think the issue that we have, and I can understand your hesitancy, Seb, but I think it's because he probably hasn't been playing in a system that quite shows what he would be able to do for a better team. But there's something about the way he controls the ball in tight spaces, the way he's looking around, the way he makes these little quick pass and moves that I think is really good. I mean, he's certainly got something. Whether he's the sort of player who could move straight to Manchester City, I doubt that.
Tell you what, though, if he was happy with sitting on the bench, couldn't he sit behind Bruno Fernandes if he was going to sit on the bench? Like the sort of player that might make a difference at a team like Manchester United, as and when the first 11 are tired, right?
He's not played as a 10 for Norwich though. In that role, Norwich have tended to go for a sort of more of a shadow striker, someone who can hold the ball up and try and be a goal threat like a Stiepermann or an Andre Duda, who's actually quite an underrated player, I think. But possibly. The other thing with Buendia is he's still very young, like he's 23, I think. So there's the opportunity to kind of mould him into something slightly different and take that skill set and put it somewhere different on the pitch. He's not an inverted right winger for a top side.
No.
I think he's either a 10 or possibly he's an 8, but in a midfield 3.
The way you describe him, Alex, like an 8 in a midfield 3, that probably makes him quite a nice little option for someone like Everton. To rebalance that midfield. Obviously, you got a little bit more surgery to do with its defensive abilities, but that might be quite a nice little addition.
I mean, that's certainly possible. I think at the moment Everton seem to be cleaving quite heavily to a 4-4-2, though, don't they? So I don't know if there's room for that. I mean, maybe, again, a slightly left field thing, if you're looking for somebody who can take over the João Moutinho, kind of progressive passing, not necessarily getting forward too much, but releasing players ahead of them, but with the protection of 2 other midfield players and wing backs, someone like Wolves. It kind of makes sense, but I think you would be gambling slightly, and I guess this is your point, Seb, about the fee.
Yeah,
is that I think it is a gamble purely on the sense that he's not been played in a position that best suits him, except it worked for the Norwich system to a degree, but it's not where his future is. And so any team that buys him is going to be gambling on his technical ability and then trying to fit him in somewhere.
I wonder whether this is the summer to do that. That's kind of part of my hesitation, is that kind of ordinarily you could see someone happily paying £30 million possibly for him. But the kind of clubs that are going to do that on a sort of, not on a hunch, but with a gamble in mind, are those who are probably going to shop further up the shelf, so to speak. It's interesting. I'll be intrigued to see where he goes. I still quite like Everton because I don't think that 4-4-2 is for will last, Alex, on the basis of the way this season is finished. I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
No, I think you're right in terms of it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
But I haven't also seen them trying to do something different. Obviously, with Everton, the midfield balance has been completely upset by the injury to Gbamin. So it's impossible to know how Everton might have played if he'd been fit, because he was supposed to be the anchor to that. And Everton do seem to have a squad that would suit a 4-3-3, but they just haven't really been able to do it yet. I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Hey Seb, did you know that Harry's sponsors the Tifo Football Podcast?
I do now.
And Alex, did you know that as a listener of ours, you can start shaving with Harry's today by claiming your trial set for £3.95?
I have a beard, though.
Yeah. Support our podcast and get your set delivered to you, including a razor handle, 5-blade cartridge, foaming shave gel, and a travel blade cover, simply by going to harrys.com/Tifo right now. That's harrys.com/Tifo. Okay, Ryan McCurrock. Reasons as to why Leicester's form dropped off after the restart. Did they overachieve in the first half of the season? I mean, if they did, then they hugely underachieved in the second half, or I mean after the return from the lockdown. I saw the points per game table, if it only included games that had happened after lockdown with no crowds, and Leicester were low down there.
Who were third, Joe?
Southampton.
They were.
Excellent restart. Excellent restart. Who wants to tackle this one then?
I'll have a stab at it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so there are a few asterisks to apply in that. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers lost both of his fullbacks shortly after the restart. Lost Pereira a long time before that, and also he was without Maddison. So there's there injuries are involved in this conversation. Fundamentally, though, I wonder whether there's a flakiness to Leicester. I think when we covered them early in the season, we talked about how they perform in games against the top six, but also the kind of the marquee games, the ones where we look to see, that provide a true barometer of what kind of team they are and what standard they are. And I think over time, as their form collapsed, I think kind of that general fragility showed itself, in other ways. I think one of the problems with having one of the unseen problems in having a young group of players who are all maturing and developing together is that their abilities aren't offset by a bit more experience. The kind of a couple of years ago when they first came up, they had Esteban Cambiasso in the season which they survived relegation, and I would be tempted, if I was Brendan Rodgers, to look at what happened this year and find out who 2020's version of Cambiasso actually is, because I think that's the player they need, not necessarily in a position. I think that's an element they need within their squad mix. Somebody that is able to contribute to arresting poor form, or to sort of changing the local mood as and when it deteriorates. There are other factors, I accept that, but it's just a sort of a gentle observation made over the course of the year.
Alex, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think Seb's absolutely right. And there are certain teams, and actually to a degree, I'd put Southampton in this, where you need somebody who is a bit more canny, often a bit older, a bit more direct in terms of how they communicate with other players on the pitch. And I think it's interesting that part of Southampton's return to form has been with Oriol Romeo coming in instead of Højbjerg. And Romeo, I think, does bring that presence. Leicester are a very exciting team with a lot of young players who are very, very good, but particularly in that midfield area, there isn't somebody who's got that presence, who's got the ability during the course of a game to see that things aren't quite going their way and to sort of shout and tighten things up. And Ndidi, for example, who is a fantastic screening midfielder, he's not that guy. Maddison isn't that guy. Harvey Barnes, Mark Albrighton, who's quite experienced, he's 29, he's not really been playing quite as much. So it's difficult, really, apart from Johnny Evans, who, although I think he's a consummate defender and hugely experienced, has never struck me as especially vocal. Likewise, Kasper Schmeichel. The leadership group in that club are... They're towards the back of the pitch, and they seem like quite nice guys. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way, left, right? Yeah, and I do, but I think that's really important. When Leicester won the title, they had in people like Wes Morgan, they had players with real presence.
Well, I mean, Wes Morgan is still playing for Leicester now. However,
he's
the presence,
barely. He's not. I mean, he's not on the pitch.
He played the other day against Manchester United.
Yeah, but he's used incredibly infrequently on the basis of other people's injuries. Like he's not a starter.
No, and also his communication didn't seem to make much difference to that game.
Not when Anthony Martial was running beyond him.
No.
No, I mean, Manchester United are particularly good at the moment. So look, I think Leicester need to, when you have a group of players, and then this is one of those things with Brendan Rodgers, because Brendan Rodgers is, I mean, he's not a young manager now, but he kind of conveys a bit of youngness. Like he doesn't have that bastard in him, right? So it feels like there's a soft centre to that team, and that's sometimes why Rodgers' teams implode towards the end of seasons.
Delicious in a chocolate, but not always in a football team.
Right, exactly. So there needs to be, you want a bit of grit in the middle of it.
You want a hard bastard.
You want something to chip a tooth on.
Yeah,
I would be tempted also to have a new centre half. I remember, what's happened this season with Soyuncu is really interesting because it's an example of what happens when someone starts the season well and no one kind of notices when a player sort of drifts away. I remember watching him at Stamford Bridge right at the beginning of the season, and he looked excellent, defensively good, nice on the ball. He's not elegant on the ball because he's quite a cumbersome sort of vending machine shape, but he was good enough. Over time, it's as if his experiences through the league, in the odd, the games in which Leicester didn't fare as well, it's as if they've spooked him because something's happened to his general level of performance. And he, when we came back into the lockdown, a lot of people still had him in their team of the season, which is absolutely ridiculous because he's had probably about 3 months of poor form leading into that. So I don't know what kind of player he is. Is he the person we saw at the end of 2019, the defender who you could probably build an entire defence around if you were adding a fullback in Ben Chilwell's position if he were to leave, or another defensive midfielder in front of him to sit alongside Ndidi? Is he the permanent piece? On the basis of what he's been since the turn of the year, I'd argue no. So I don't think that's as clear-cut a position as it was 6 months ago. So that's something to look at potentially, or at least at the very least he needs a little bit of competition in there, I think, and that's more of a sensible transfers chat. I accept that, but it's interesting. Leicester are not quite what we thought they were.
Okay, moving on. Han Gyul Park says, in the Aston Villa versus Sheffield United game when the Blades were robbed 3 points, do you think if an incident like that happens, the FA overturn it and give it to Sheffield? I'm going to rephrase this question because it's not that well phrased. Basically, I think this person is asking us, what about the situation with Aston Villa and the goal that wasn't a goal? Because, of course, Bournemouth, I think the news came out last night or this morning that the BBC are reporting that Bournemouth are considering or making movements to...
They're going to discuss.
They're going to discuss the idea of taking action against... who? I mean, is it Hawkeye they're taking action against?
It would be the Premier League, I'd have thought.
Taking action against the Premier League on the basis that their relegation was mathematically, theoretically, as a result of Aston Villa's conceding a goal that ended up not being a goal, and the goal line technology not recognising that when it should have done. Which, to be honest, is a conversation that Seb, you and I were having a few days ago, because I'd heard tell that something might be afoot, and I wasn't really sure. So I asked you, and you said nah. And then I laughed at you yesterday when the news came out. Do you want to explain that a little bit more? Do you want to explain how I'm really in the know and you don't know anything, actually?
Yeah, no, well, you just want to hear your little victory from somebody else. Okay, well, we'll do that.
Thank you.
So a couple of days ago, Joe and I were talking on WhatsApp about the idea that a relegated club, we weren't specifically referencing Bournemouth at the time, might take legal action as a result of the Hawkeye goal line technology failure in the Aston Villa-Sheffield United game. And I said to him in that kind of very dismissive way that I do quite often, no, because this is just what happens. This is a refereeing mistake, essentially, because Hawkeye has become part of the referee's brief, really. And now, as of yesterday, I texted Joe to tell him that Bournemouth were considering it, and it was the happiest I've heard him in about 6 weeks.
I was very happy because it's not often that I get to have one over on you, Seb. But I had one over on you there, and I hope that they do sue the Premier League.
Well, you know what's interesting,
just to prove my
Joe?
point even more.
I looked this up, and there is an IFAB rule which says that, and I'm quoting here, in principle, a match is not invalidated because of, malfunction of the VAR technology, brackets, as for goal line technology. So I
Seb,
wonder...
you're exactly the kind of person who, when you lose an argument, you bring quotes to the next argument.
Yeah, I bring the machine gun to the knife fight. Absolutely.
That's who you are.
Absolutely. My ego's far too delicate just to let that stand.
Now, that's interesting. So what you're saying there is that theoretically it's not possible for them to do this.
Yeah, which, and funnily enough, it makes me agree with you more, because I don't really accept that one line as a kind of, as something that should appease a club that have suffered. What I will say is that in this situation, logically, just because goal line technology failed in that instance and that goal did not count, that does not mean that Aston Villa would not have taken a point from it.
It doesn't. But also equally,
that's the argument I expect to be used.
I would suggest that if goal line technology was not included in the game, that would have been ruled as a goal. Like, it's obvious to the linesman that it's gone in. It's obvious to the referee that it's gone in. He's waiting for his watch, which doesn't buzz, and therefore he doesn't make a decision. I remember tweeting about it at the time and saying, like, this really is a kind of strange sci-fi world now where people are ignoring things that they can clearly see in front of them because technology has not confirmed that what they're seeing is real. And it was. I don't know. I thought it was a crazy thing, and also I think, to finish the conversation that we were having the other day, Seb, I remember making the point that referees are fallible, and everybody accepts that. And so if a referee makes a mistake, it's not something that you're going to take out legal action against. This goal line technology was brought in, as far as I'm aware, on the basis that it doesn't make errors. Like this, it's technology. The whole purpose of its existence is to eradicate those sorts of errors. So when there is an error of these sorts of proportions, and yes, you're absolutely right that you can't be sure whether Aston Villa would have got a point out of the game, or maybe would have won anyway, or would have lost. We don't know. But we were robbed of our opportunity to know because of a huge malfunction. And I do feel sorry for Bournemouth supporters in this case. I also do understand that this would be the natural position of any large business to consider all options when something goes wrong. So it doesn't necessarily mean that something is going to happen, or that, if they are considering or discussing it, it doesn't mean that they think it's the right thing to do either. It's just something that they would naturally discuss as a large business, right?
And I completely understand that instinct. I worry what would happen if this becomes a precedent. If you have a situation where relegation is no longer this sort of binary situation, it is just the start of the argument. We got relegated, but our team of lawyers in the kind of the Manchester City sense are marching towards some kind of loophole, which makes it slightly more ambiguous. I wonder, because I suspect what will happen here is the other aspect of that game, which was interesting, was that obviously goal line technology failed, but also VAR failed. VAR, as you mentioned, Joe, VAR clearly saw that the ball was in the net. I mean, the goalkeeper was lying in the net like it was a hammock. So yes, it was a goal. But then maybe PGMOL argue that actually this is a refereeing mistake because Stockley Park had the opportunity to intervene but didn't. So does it become human errors as a result of that? I don't know. So it's really,
we're passing a baton between a robot and man.
Yeah, it's very, very complicated. So it's interesting. I don't like the idea of someone suing their way out of a relegation. There's no indication that that's actually what Bournemouth are trying to do, but or yet. But it's there's a dangerous precedent to be set here potentially.
No, fine. Okay. Alex, Sagerwine asks, has the new 5 substitutions rule changed anything tactically? Are there any drawbacks that outweigh the obvious benefits?
I think it's hard to say if it's changed anything tactically on the basis that it's being used in a circumstance where the predominant concern is refreshing players that are getting tired, because I think the answer is, at the moment, we don't yet know.
How could it theoretically, though?
Well, theoretically, I think it would be easiest for managers who look to close out the game. I think the area where you could see it change things tactically most clearly would be when a team is 1-0 up with 10 minutes to go and they're able to bring on players that allow them to change the system, say from a 4-man back line to a 5-man back line.
So Mourinho's coming back.
Yeah, possibly. But no, I mean, I think it's not like in rugby, for example, where there's 7 substitutes allowed and teams will regularly refresh their entire front row at 60 minutes or something to provide physical impetus. Football, I think, there's limited stuff that you can do tactically in that way apart from change formations. And obviously 5 substitutions would allow you to do that more flexibly. But I also think to a degree that teams are quite flexible already. For me, the interesting thing about 5 substitutions is more the opportunity to give younger players or other squad players minutes where they wouldn't necessarily have had them otherwise. But I think the honest answer is at this point we don't really know. Drawbacks, I guess that games can become unstructured if there are too many changes that occur at the same time. That's something that does happen in rugby sometimes. So if you had a team that made 4 changes, they could lose their rhythm, they could lose their shape. But again, I think managers will be very conscious of that, and so they are unlikely to make sweeping changes of that nature.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to quickly roll straight on to the next question for you as well, Alex. What are the most important stats for centre-backs? And that was asked by Ruiz Sports.
So generally speaking, obviously this is with the caveat that different data providers call things differently. But what you want to look at is pressures, interceptions, blocks, clearances, defensive duels if you're looking on Y-Scout, obviously aerial ability, and also something called progressive passing. The definition of progressive passing changes depending on the provider, but it's basically a good indication of the ability to get the ball forwards to your teammates. And with defensive players generally, but especially with fullbacks, I know that's not the question, it's a very, very strong indicator of the ability of a young player to be able to do stuff. So if you have a young player who's making a decent number of blocks, a decent number of clearances, and also is racking up, I guess, anywhere above maybe 7.5, 8 progressive passes per 90, that's a promising player. If you also then add in how many minutes they're getting, that's something that's quite interesting. Obviously, younger players getting good minutes is a very good sign. I would also just caveat all of that by saying that it depends on the centre-back you're looking for. So obviously, the centre-back that a Liverpool would want is going to be different to what a Wolves one would want, and also it will depend on which centre-back you're looking at. StatsBomb did a very interesting piece recently on their Spanish language site comparing the difference in positions that different centre-back pairings take. So some teams you'll have one centre-back pushing much further up the pitch than the other one, and there's a greater disparity in their starting distances. That's because some centre-backs are very proactive and look to push forwards, and other ones hang back and sweep up. So again, you need to really look at what exactly it is you're trying to measure in order to gauge whether that player is a good fit for that system in that position.
Yeah. Sam Douglas asks you, how did Jordan Henderson win Player of the Year over Kevin De Bruyne? Now, before you get upset with me, you started this because you included this in the plan, and also you told me already that you voted for Virgil van Dijk. So how did Jordan Henderson win Player of the Year over Kevin De Bruyne? Who votes for this stuff?
Okay, so Sam's referring to the Football Writers vote. There's 2 votes for Player of the Year, the PFA and the Football Writers.
So it's because all football writers are Liverpool fans, right?
Pretty much. Well, that's the accepted logic on social media. It's really important. It's really important to clarify this, because the Football Writers Association get it in the neck every single year over things like this. But it's because the directive on the vote is not for it just to be a reward for trophies and tangible achievement and statistics and goals and assists, even though sometimes it often is. There is license within the voting for it to be in a slightly more abstract appreciation and more of a, what's the story been? And I think I didn't vote for Jordan Henderson, but I can completely understand why he won the award, because if you think about where he was 5 or 6 years ago, where, the point in his career when, Brendan Rodgers was trying to loan him to Fulham and trying to get rid of him. And, the moments when he played fullback just to find a use for himself in the side. this is a great story to go from there to being a European Cup winning, Premier League winning captain. That's an amazing story. And also, there is also room here for an appreciation for Jordan Henderson, the person, during the lockdown, and in light of some of the things that were said by the British government about Premier League footballers. Jordan Henderson set a tremendous example, just like Marcus Rashford did. Rashford himself got a lot of votes, and no one would argue that Rashford has been the best player in the Premier League this year, or even necessarily in the top three. But he's had a good season. But it's about more than just what happens on the pitch, because it is Footballer of the Year. It is not Premier League Forward of the Year, or midfielder, or goal scorer, or goalkeeper of the year. It is a more circumspect award, and I fully appreciate that sometimes football writers can come across as very self-important. We're all guilty of that. I completely take that criticism. This is what the award is supposed to be. It's fair, and also, when you've got two awards, and when one, the PFA, which will be announced soon, when one is more literal, I think there's room for a second which takes other factors into account.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of the podcast now. There is one more question here that I could ask. But Alex, I would only accept an answer if it was sung to the tune of Bohemian Rhapsody. How would a team managed by Alex play? I want style of play. I want one player profile. I want the name maybe. But I will only accept it in that. So let me just kick you
harmony,
off. I'm going to kick dun 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 dun. Alex, yeah. Please talk about your team to me. There you go. Now off you go.
Oh God, I can't do this twice in a podcast.
I know. I wasn't really expecting you to. That's why the episode is over. Thanks so much to everyone for listening today. Don't forget that you can get a 30-day free trial at The Athletic by visiting theathletic.com/a Tifo. There's no in there. I'm just putting it in there as I say it. So, try a few different combinations, see what works. A Tifo. You'll get there in the end. Seb, thanks very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Alex, a thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week with other things. Oh, incidentally, Sensible Transfers is on the way. 10th of August, we kick off our 3-week Sensible Transfer season. I believe in that space of time there will be 10 videos for you to watch on all the biggest clubs, and also 11 podcasts from in a 4-week time period from the 10th of August. So you'll be hearing a lot more of us, and hopefully we'll be able to bring some of our friends and colleagues from The Athletic too, to give us a little bit more insight about the teams that we are discussing before we suggest players to completely change that. Thanks again, and back next week with something else. I don't know what it is. Bye.